Сайн байцгаана уу хүн төлөвчтэй. Өнөөдөр орой манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Америкийн нэгдсэн улсын элчин сайд хадагтай Пайпэр Anne Wind Campbell оролцож байна. Good evening.
Hello, Jargo. Nice to see you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You are going to leave soon after 4 years?
3.
3 years
Right.
service as ambassador of the United States of America to Mongolia. And these last 3 years were ups and downs in the economy, but always good growth in the bilateral relations. And how do you see these 3 years change, economic and political change in this country you have been observing?
You said that there had been ups and downs in the economy. I think that's exactly right. It's been an interesting time to be in Mongolia. I've loved and felt so honored to be the U.S. ambassador to this country. And I think we've been able to do many important things in the bilateral relationship. But that has occurred against the backdrop of the challenges, as you mentioned, in the economy. And I certainly have high hopes that when I have a chance to return to Mongolia in the future as a tourist, that I will see Mongolia in a stronger economic position than it is in today.
As we talk, Mongolia is celebrating with international community of friends the first democratic elections anniversary, 25th anniversary. We have the honor to receive a guest from State Department, their office. For Mongolia, democracy is something which is already part of our life. And I know, based on my experience also studying in the U.S. and having a lot of friends, democracy is also a part and parcel of your life, daily life. How do you see democracy as value yourself?
As you said, today is the anniversary of the 25th anniversary of Mongolia's first free and fair elections. And it was fun this morning to participate in the conference celebrating the importance of those 25 years. I loved the fact that the conference was a celebration in so many different ways. There were politicians and senior government officials speaking.
Herdsman was there.
There were very ordinary
Yes.
Mongolians, teachers, herdsmen, businessmen, talking about their own personal perspective on democracy. I think that perhaps Mongolia and the United States are two of the few countries which would approach an anniversary of democracy in this way, to recognize how important it is to celebrate what we've achieved, to make sure that it's not only a government celebration, but that it incorporates that range of views, but also to introduce an element of criticism and to say that not everything is rosy, not everything is perfect, and to be willing to have an element of self-criticism in the hopes that by doing so, that you can do better. I think that Secretary Kerry, who taped video remarks, which were shown this morning, he said something along the lines of democracy is never perfect, but we can always strive to work to make it better. And the advantages and the opportunities created by democracy are without competition.
Exactly. You know, we in a way celebrating political freedom of the country, which became a part of our life as we talked. But nowadays we talk about economic freedom. And through both freedom development, we have been cooperating a lot with your country. And IRI, for example, which was from the beginning in the country to make better civic society in the country. So in terms of that economic cooperation between two countries, how you would describe it, current level today?
The current level is positive, and certainly the trajectory over the last few years continues to be positive. And so we see more American imports into Mongolia. We see more Mongolian exports to the United States. The fact that the Mongolian parliament ratified the transparency agreement in December of last year was an important step forward in creating the environment for two-way trade and commercial relations. And so there's much to be happy about, but personally, I want to see more. I want to see more U.S. businesses engaged in Mongolia. I want to see more American franchises represented here. We've got Kentucky Fried Chicken. I think we may have Burger King in the near future. And it's wonderful from my perspective. It's wonderful to see U.S. brands, very high quality brands available in Mongolia. But I believe that there's room for more. And so, for example, when I traveled to the United States with Prime Minister Kэмbэллийг in June, I think it was an important opportunity for Mongolian officials to talk directly with U.S. businesses, to both encourage further foreign direct investment, but also to listen to some of the concerns that the U.S. businesses have and that the embassy often represents.
So we keep kind of making better the road of businesses, cooperations through faults, mistakes, achievements, and discussions open through very open discussions with all community in between two countries. Many people are visiting. Now, compared to even 3 years back, nothing to say about 10 years back, the visitors from Mongolian side and the U.S. side, how do you see that trend?
I think when we look at so we're, as we said a moment ago, celebrating the 25th anniversary of Mongolia's first free and fair election. So I arrived the 25th anniversary year of the U.S.-Mongolia bilateral relations. I love the fact that I arrived on a 25th anniversary year and I will finish my time in Mongolia with another 25th anniversary. So it's important to keep in mind that the U.S.-Mongolia relationship is still quite young, just as Mongolia's democracy is still quite young. But when we look at the 25 years of the bilateral relations, we've seen so many visits in both directions. I mentioned Prime Minister Kэмbэлlik's June visit, so 2 months ago. Just a few weeks ago, Foreign Minister Sarin was in Washington. I believe he was actually the first foreign official that Secretary Kerry was able to meet immediately after finishing the Iran negotiations. And that's a good indication of how important the relationship with Mongolia is from a U.S. perspective, that we gave that degree of priority to the foreign minister's visit. As you noted, we have a delegation here, and Secretary Kerry taped remarks. And in his taped remarks, he said that he looked forward to visiting
Mongolia next year. Yes.
He said before the end of next year, he hoped.
So, of course, because this very close bilateral relations, Mongolia regards, and I understand from Mr. Kerry's speech, that United States of America is our very important third neighbor. How do you see that concept being not only announced but implemented, where we have to pay more attention, according to your opinion?
I love the fact that one of the aspects of Mongolia's foreign policy is an explicit statement of the third neighbor policy. So a recognition that it's very important for Mongolia to get along well, to have positive relations with both of its proximate neighbors, Russia and China. But more than that Mongolia wants to reach out to the world and to develop strong relationships with other democracies. And that was one of the things which first attracted me to Mongolia as a country, and one of the things that made me say, I want to come and be ambassador to a country which is so strategic and thoughtful, and which doesn't sit and say, here are our problems, but instead is proactive in designing a policy around creating new connections.
See, we are in between another large, close first and second neighbors. That's why the third neighbors are the countries removed a bit, but close to our say, dynamics of our life. Do you see any kind of strength or difficulties in developing that third part third neighbor policy in Mongolia compared with our neighbors?
I think that you mentioned the political aspect and of course the economic aspect, and then the third aspect I often talk about is the people to people. So I think if we look at the political aspect of the third neighbor policy is very strong, very healthy, and has been well established over these last 27 years. The people-to-people relationship also is equally strong. We've got 150 Peace Corps volunteers in Mongolia today, serving in every IMAG, and with 60% of them living in Gare and experiencing, sharing a very genuine Mongolia experience. We have great programs like the Fulbright program, great organizations here in Mongolia like the Mongolian Alumni of Studies in the United States, with which I think you're familiar.
Yeah, of course.
And so I would say that those two aspects of the third neighbor policy are perfect. The middle aspect is the economic and commercial. And that's where I think to see the full value of the third neighbor policy in both directions, we need the economic and commercial relationship to be as strong and as healthy as the political and the people-to-people is.
That's a great hope and expectations, and I hope Mongolian businesses will come to the level of that economies of scale, and the business environment will be improved. Of course, you have been addressing during your tenure here that issues, and could you highlight one to three issues that Mongolia would be better if they do it to attract your businesses to Mongolia?
And any outsider always has to be careful when they critique. But I hope that the fact that I've spent 3 years here, that I've listened I've talked to so many people. I've listened to Mongolian businesses, I've talked to officials in order to really try to understand the situation, and that when I offer critiques that they come from a place of hope for improvement. I think one point that I've made is that many of the U.S. companies which are operating in Mongolia, not only U.S. companies, I'd perhaps even go wider and say many of the international companies which are currently operating in Mongolia are experiencing challenges in the area of taxation, in the area of unclear implementation of existing legislation, and many of them have ongoing judicial issues as well. And so when other companies are thinking about coming to invest in Mongolia, one of the first things they do is to speak with similar companies already here. And a point I regularly make is that if what new companies hear from the companies which are already resident is that they're having challenges, that's going to dissuade new investment. And so my first suggestion would be that it is, I think, very important for the government of Mongolia to listen carefully to the business community, the Mongolian business community and the international business community, and to try, as I sincerely believe that they're doing, to try to resolve some of the problems in the existing business climate.
And I understand to listen to the investors, plus the legal environment to be more stable, not changing,
exactly.
to
Stability,
be predictable.
Sanctity of contract, commitment to signing international agreements and to enforcing and sticking with those.
I understand these issues are reflected in this transparency agreement, including also at least the information of draft law to be in, say, in the language that the other people can read, isn't it?
That's right. I'd say two of the key principles, three of the key principles in the transparency agreement. The first is that when legislators are discussing new laws, that it's useful for them to understand the impact of those laws. They still have absolute sovereign authority in Mongolia to decide the direction that they should take, but those should be well-informed decisions. And so the idea of making draft legislation available and soliciting input about what would be the impacts of that legislation is one of the key principles of the Transparency Agreement. A second is ensuring that laws that deal with economic and commercial matters are available in English.
Yeah.
And English is really, I think we can say, the international language of commerce.
Yes.
So I've had friends from Japan and other non-English language countries say it would be easier for them as well if there were clear laws available in English. Right now, a lot of different companies and a lot of different embassies do their own translation.
Yes.
And when you've got 20 different people translating, there's going to be a little bit of muddiness. There's going to be confusion.
Yes.
And I think that if the government
Yes.
produces the law, not just economic and commercial laws,
Yes.
but with the Transparency Agreement, the government commits to produce those laws, their version in English.
You know, I would think even when it is the law draft is at the level of discussions before considering or discussing at the parliament, if those are in English, we will have wider audience of stakeholders who will be touched by this law later on. I think in that sense, transparency idea was great.
Yes.
And
Chair Galashan mentioned the third element of the Transparency Agreement, which is a commitment to the principles of anti-corruption.
yes,
And I think that's such a key element of creating a stable business environment as well.
that's exactly another subject I want to address because according to this MCA, Millennium Challenge Accounts, or corporations' requirement is there should be no corruption, less corruption. Your country has a particular law, and like many other countries, that you cannot be corrupt or corrupting when you do business, U.S. companies doing business abroad. So in that sense, how this MCA's second discussions or second, I understand, compact is coming to Mongolia, at which level is that going on now?
So, as you said, a strong stance against corruption and having the right type of legislation and enforcement mechanisms, I think is important for any developing country, any country which wants to grow their economy. The Millennium Challenge Corporation, which is a U.S. development agency, which is committed to reducing poverty through economic growth, looks at each country's record in anti-corruption, in legislation and enforcement, etc. And the board of the MCC will only work with countries which have a good record of laws and actions to address corruption. When the board of the MCC took a decision to enter into negotiations on a second compact with Mongolia, and they took that decision in December of last year.
Yes.
It was in recognition of the important steps that Mongolia has taken. But certainly this is an area where I think even additional action and additional steps will be required. We're not sure yet what area of activity in Mongolia the second compact will focus upon, but certainly one of the things that we saw throughout the first compact, which finished in 2013 and was a $285 million commitment from the American people to Mongolia's economic and social growth, was that the principles of anti-corruption, of having clear contracting practices, of having any situation where an official might have a business interest, anywhere where there was a conflict of interest, having those declared and having officials recuse themselves from a decision, having oversight of the people who do the work. Some of the most basic principles of how you fight corruption.
That's what we need in the country the most
and
now.
I think some of those principles were incorporated in the first compact. I should also say that I think it's really important to address the issue of corruption from a point of humility. I think you spoke recently with former Congressman Dreyer. I did as well. And one of the points he made was that every country has corruption. We certainly have challenges with corruption in the United States. One of the reasons we have rules like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is that there were instances of U.S. companies going overseas and doing the wrong things. And so the U.S. doesn't approach the question of corruption from I hope that we don't approach it from a finger wagging, we know what's right and you're all wrong.
These
Instead,
are challenges, you see.
We approach this as a challenge every country faces.
Exactly.
And the question isn't, do you have corruption? The question is, how do you address the corruption
Correct.
that exists? And how do you put the right systems in place to try to deter people from being tempted to corrupt actions?
These are the challenges we have to address anyway. This country, and I think we are the most difficult challenge we have today, improving our economic freedom is corruption. You have talked about elevating or decreasing poverty through economic growth. Along with that, when we talk about poverty, we at times or often sometimes forget people who have certain disability. And this is not the issue of taking care of them and loving them, but they want to be a part of the society. In that regard, you have done a wonderful job having several projects in this regard. And you recently hosted an event, ADA event. Please tell us about that. And I mean, nobody's forcing you to do so. What makes you to have that special projects?
So we've talked about two important 25th anniversaries, the 25th anniversary of the U.S.-Mongolia relationship, the 25th anniversary of Mongolia's democracy. Another 25th anniversary being celebrated this month is the 25th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act. And that was incredibly important legislation which enshrined in the U.S. system two ideas. The first, that Americans with disabilities have rights, rights to access education, employment, sports, everything and anything essentially which is provided by the government. And that people, Americans with disabilities and those without, should fight to reduce discrimination. I have been very proud of the work that the U.S. Embassy in Mongolia has been able to do in conjunction and in cooperation with so many different Mongolian organizations to support the discussion going on in Mongolia about how to improve access for Mongolia's disabled people to education, to employment, and even to things like health care, sports opportunities, etc. You have Mongolians participating right now in the Special Olympics in the United States. And you also, at this moment, have a Mongolian disabled activist in the United States speaking with counterparts, sharing impressions, sharing stories. And so, like so many things, I think it has to be a two-way conversation. We brought Judith Heumann, the Special Advisor on Disability Rights, to Mongolia a little over a year ago. Ms. Heumann is in a wheelchair, and even for the embassy, it was a learning experience to walk around Ulaanbaatar through the eyes of a person in a wheelchair and to say, which buildings could we have meetings in? Where
have
would,
access.
even in my own home. When I arrived in Mongolia, my own home was not accessible to people in wheelchairs. And I said, that's not right. And so during my time here, we built a ramp, we completely revised the bathroom, because I want to be able to host the full range of Mongolians. And if I'm limited, if my infrastructure limits our ability to interact, then that's a problem I need to solve.
And this is the mission of every, I think, citizens, to help the people to have access to be included into the society. And I'm very also happy in cooperation with your embassy during your time. We have accomplished this website that helps bitchatten.mn, which helps people with moving disability to enroll into jobs. And the several other projects with blind people also, some of them went to the U.S., even studied, and all this, what you did is not only making our economic and political prosperity goes better, but also the society becomes more human, more loving each other, isn't it?
It's starting from the principle of inclusion and then asking oneself, what are the problems which keep people from being included, being able to participate? And I think if we all just take a few minutes to look around and to think about our surroundings through the eyes of a person with disability, that it raises our awareness. And there are many problems that in fact are quite easy to solve if we take the time and the effort. I appreciated at today's events that the speaker emphasized one of Mongolia's accomplishments as being the fact that disabled Mongolians were able to vote in the 2013 presidential election. And I think the government's awareness and attention to the rights of people with disabilities has really improved as well. I'm pleased that there's new legislation with Parliament. I'm very hopeful that Parliament will have the time during the fall session to act on that legislation, which goes further to enshrine the rights of people with disabilities. As you said, it's not only a question of caring for them. We need not to be sort of maternalistic or paternalistic, but it's also giving them opportunity.
You know, my last question about you as a career diplomat, which served the country all the way to this post of ambassador, a woman ambassador, and also our next ambassador, I understand that also another lady is coming.
Another career ambassador, yes, indeed.
What does it take to be ambassador of the United States of America, you think?
There's so many different ways you could answer that. I think it takes an interest in a wide range of issues. One of the most interesting aspects of being an ambassador is that you handle so many different topics. Yeah, just when I think about the last couple weeks, we at the embassy, we launched a GARE for the Future, a project where we have a space where we're trying to create opportunities for scientific collaboration. So I think about air pollution, I think about environmental issues. 2 weeks ago, I went to an area just a couple hours west of Hatgal and participated in a rally where foreigners who had purchased motorcycles and ridden them from Ulaanbaatar handed them over to forest rangers to provide additional equipment. It was part of a broader event, which also included a signing ceremony between Yosemite National Park and two Mongolian national parks and 2 strictly protected areas. Got to ride a motorcycle for the first time.
I see.
And then, of course, in June, we had the very important U.S.-Mongolian joint peacekeeping exercise, HONQUEST. We've got this delegation right now focusing on democracy. So to be a good ambassador, I think you have to work very hard. You have to have an interest in a broad range of topics. And more than anything, I think you have to be willing to sort of show a little bit of who you are as a person and not just stay literally and figuratively behind the embassy walls.
You exactly were that person. Thank you very much. Coming, and first of all, it's great to know you, to work as much as independent media can work, and to see the things you have accomplished in this country. And I think the future of this in between 2 countries are great, I think. And thank you very much for your contribution to that.
Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you
My
very
pleasure.
much. Thank you. За хүн үзэгчдээ өнөөдөр фактын нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Америкийн нэгдсэн улсын элчин сайд хадагтай Кэмбэлл оролцлоо. Их баярлалаа.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Because, you know, I was following my minutes and they were